Pedro from A&P-REACTS. I'm here today with Paul Visser from Black Orchid Empire. How are you doing?
I'm very, very well. How are you?
I'm good. I'm good. By the way, I love your beard. I got to start off with that because
Thank you very much.
perhaps the only thing that's at par with your vocals is your beard.
Well, I got to make sure it doesn't get too much longer then, because then I might get a mismatch and I have to make sure they add up. Well,
I feel like you'll be able to somehow manage have greatness on both ends, vocally and then obviously on your facial expressions with that great beard of yours.
Well, I'm glad to be of service, and yours is pretty smashing as well. So it's an inspiration to us all.
Hey, you know what? If music for you doesn't work out at the end, we can always perhaps start a website about men's beards or something. I don't know.
That's a great idea, but I am like the worst ever because I do zero. I just wash my hair and wash. That's it. That's all that happens. I'm like, you get those people who are super into like every different kind of oil and stuff like that. I'm just like, no, I'm just lazy, and this is what happens when you're lazy. It's that simple. So,
well, you know, that says something about your genes because you're able to not do anything about it and still look magnificent. So that says more about you than it says about the other guys that have to spend all that money on products.
I'm going to call it the, maybe there's some Viking blood in there. I don't know. You know.
All right, let's get started with the album. I really have to ask you this question to start off, which is, did the concept of the album drive the sound on the record, or did the sound on the record create the concept of the album?
That's a really interesting question. And they happen basically simultaneously, because the way we always create music is always going to be like a sound idea first. And our sound develops from recording, but it also develops from playing live and fiddling with different stuff and changing over time. So, for example, on our first album, Archetype, we had like, I think one song where I used the tuning I use for guitar, the bad gad tuning. So I'm normally in dad gad, but this is a bad gad, where you just have one low beat. And then on Yugen, there's like a couple of songs that have that tuning, whereas Semaphore is almost all that tuning with two songs that have the other tuning. So I guess I was playing with guitar tones and playing with tunings and ideas and stuff, and that meant that it naturally developed into writing different riffs from what I'd written before. And the reason I changed my tunings, or the reason I don't play in a standard tuning, is specifically to stop myself from writing the same thing over and over again. I met a guy called John Brown from a band called Monuments, who are amazing. And I used to work with him in a guitar shop, and he was showing me this like dad gad, like open tuning, and he plays that but super down tuned low. So he kind of opened my eyes to doing weird tunings, and before I'd been in like standard or like drop D. This is super guitar nerd shit, but you get it. And what that did is it made me write things that I'd never written before, and it was always super interesting, and it kind of took me by surprise, because I'd moved to a different position and it would sound totally different from what I thought it was going to be early on, and that opened up some new interesting ideas. So I think riffs always come first. Either myself or Dave, and also Billy, will have like an idea, maybe like a pattern, like just a rhythmic pattern, or for example, Red Waves. Dave had the idea of that rhythm where it goes da 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 ba 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 da da ba 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 ba, right? And he thought of that in like the shower and one morning, and he ran into the studio. He was like, "I've got to record this thing I got." So he had that idea first, and then whoever didn't come up with the idea is going to be the person changing it and morphing it and taking bits out and putting bits in and going, "That's cool, but let's repeat that one note and let's take this part out." And we call it riff farming. So we just constantly like twist it up and change it up and try and make it more and more interesting, but not to the point where it becomes annoying. And you know, when you get a riff that's so complicated you don't even know where it is, we try to stop just short of that point. But we'll always have those ideas first, and then melody will happen, because I'm always humming gibberish, and then the lyrics really don't come until after that. So it was only right at the beginning of the process where we had, for example, Death From Above was the first riff we wrote. And we were on tour for Yugen in like 2018 in Germany. And we came up with the riff, and we were just jamming it in sound check. And our sound guy was like, "Stop doing that, I don't know that song." So that was like it's been a long time of those things happening. And it wasn't until like summer of last year where, or just before that, where we sat down and did some of the kind of writing part. And I had an idea that I'd like to do something that tied everything together, that gave me lyrical freedom, and not just, I wasn't just going to be constrained to writing about my own experience. I could write about anything I wanted to, and it would tell a story, but also have some sort of meaning to it that wasn't going to be just experiential. So I think I came up with the idea of having an element that was working like that. And I think somebody, probably Dave, suggested maybe a sci-fi thing. I'm not really sure, because it was very organic. We just used to, like, you know, have a couple of drinks, and after our normal day's session in the studio had ended, we would do our band stuff and just have fun. So it was a very organic process. But that's a very long way of saying music first.
But I enjoy that, because you kind of answered like 3 questions that I had all in one. So like you're let's see, once again, you're proving like your DNA is the greatest. You know what I mean? It's not just the beer, it's not just the vocals, it's even the way you answer questions.
I'm just good at talking shit about myself.
Do you feel like perhaps this album will allow the band to grow and expand a little bit beyond the boundaries that you guys set with the previous record?
I can give you some data on that. So Singularity so far, which is the opening song of the record after the intro, already has more streams than every individual song on the whole of our first album. So wow. Yeah, we've had like 250,000 streams on the album so far, and it's like Tuesday and it was out on Friday. It's been really well received, and it's feeling like it's got some momentum. I think what's different is we've been building solidly for a long time. We've had bigger touring opportunities, which have been fantastic. We've had a label who are fantastic, as you know, and have been doing nothing but nurturing us to be creative. And they basically signed us off from our second record, from like the demos, and let us just get on with it. And then we did the demos for Semaphore, and they were like, "This sounds great, just let us know when it's finished." So we were like, okay. So it's been a long, slow process, but it feels like we've finally gone over a little sort of hill where it starts to feel easier. And I think the concept of it and the amount of detailed work we put into the whole project, because we literally have controlled every single part of this, from the very first note to the font to I drew all of the artwork and Dave did all the layout, and I'm writing some stories for the songs as well. They're gonna come out, and we built the website, and it's fully DIY. So I feel like people are kind of appreciating the amount of work that went into it in a weird way, without knowing that's what they're doing. I think they just like the fact that there's a lot of detail there, and it feels like something that has some layers. So for a lot of reasons, I feel like it's definitely being more well received than anything we've done before.
I think it's perhaps there's a little bit, maybe 75% of obviously the work you guys put into the record is undeniable. I mean, anybody who listens to the album, I don't care how much you know or don't know about music, you could tell the amount of work that went into this record. You could feel it on every single song. And then obviously being with Long Branch Records, like you mentioned, such a great label, I think that also then helps to reach an audience. I'm a perfect example of that. If you guys were not on Long Branch Records, perhaps I wouldn't have checked out the record. But the fact that you guys are being released on that label, a label that in my opinion always puts out great young bands, super talented bands, I was like, okay, if these guys are promoting this record, they're putting out this record, it's got to be good. You know, it's got to be good. So
that's for sure.
You know, and then obviously when you play the record, then it's on you. Up until that point, it's not. But from that point forward, then it's all on you guys, on what you guys do. And once I pressed play, I was like, okay, I wasn't wrong. You know, like you guys delivered a magnificent record. And I was going to ask you about the guitar sound, because I really felt the guitar sound overall. So that, I guess that goes a little bit into what you were saying about playing with a different tuning. I felt that the guitar sound approach on this record was so dynamic. You really didn't set yourself boundaries in terms of saying, okay, this is going to be our sound and this is our signature sound, and every song is going to have a small variation so it doesn't sound the same, but we can't stray too far from this path. I didn't feel that at all.
I don't think we have a signature thing. I think our signature is to be eclectic and to blend heaviness and melody. That's basically it, which is not exactly a new idea, but I think our whole thing is let's push both as hard as we can. So, I mean, obviously, there's like way heavier bands than us, but some of the riffs on the record are heavy riffs. They're heavy riffs, and it's super melodic. So guitar-wise, most of the album is this guy, and it's bare knuckle pickup. You like a guitar nerd, right? This will make sense to you. Because
my knowledge is limited. My knowledge is limited. But feel free to nerd out. Feel free to nerd out.
Some people might enjoy it. I endorse bare knuckle pickups. They're fantastic pickups made in the UK, and loads of big bands use them. I use the Ragnarok, which was made by Nolly from Periphery. It's his kind of design for Misha over there, and that's amazing. And a lot of it is that, but split into a single coil, which makes it a little bit more defined and sort of toppy sounding. So my whole thing with guitars is the guitars and the bass are like this big V. So the guitars are the electricity at the top, and the bass is this huge rumble at the bottom, but they join up. So the bass is really aggressive, and there's like a perfect blend between the two. That's what I'm aiming for. So I think the key thing about the guitar sound on the record is that it's not a guitarist's guitar sound. It's not someone who's saying, I don't really care about the other stuff, I just want to play guitar. I just want everything to have a place in the mix. It's like because I'm the guitarist and also one of the three producers and the mix engineer, I'm always thinking about the end mix. I'm not thinking about how it sounds now. I'm thinking about, will this end up the way it needs to? And I think that level of objectivity about the tone is quite helpful, because a lot of guitarists they want it to sound like blow their hair back in the wind when they play, you know, and they want that thing, but they're not thinking about how that's going to translate to the final master. And I was always thinking about that. So if a guitar sound needs to be small, that's fine. That's the job. If it needs to be huge, that's fine too. If it needs to have if it needs to be a synth and not a guitar, because a couple of the sounds on the record are a synth and not a guitar. Some of the crazy solo kind of bits are not really guitar. It's just about serving the sound and serving the album. So yeah, I think it's more of a philosophy thing, although I'm also a big fan of lots of different types of band and lots of different types of guitarists. So like, I love the stuff that really technical bands like Periphery and Tesseract and Monuments do. I love the stuff that people like Deftones do, where this amazing soundscapey kind of stuff and then cool riffs as well. I also really love the stuff that Johnny Greenwood and Radiohead does, and I love the stuff that Johnny Marr does. I love this. I like lots of different varied things. So I just think about it as like a brush that you have to paint with, and it could be super aggressive and crazy, or it could be the lightest, cleanest, most ambient thing in the world, and both are equally valid. So I think it's more of it's just not really caring about having a signature sound, and much more caring about how does this work in the orchestra of the three instruments. You know? I think that's my idea.
Yeah, and I think that shows in the record, because the songs are all about themselves, not necessarily about one person within the song taking the spotlight. It's all about how all the little pieces of the puzzle come together to paint this much bigger picture, versus worrying about what each single one of them wants to do and who's in the forefront and who's in the background. I really felt that.
That's how we think about it, for sure.
Yeah.
And I think it's something that it's very unusual that you'll have a band where the drummer in the band cares about the vocal melody being perfect, and the singer wants the bass line to be perfect and the bass tone to be perfect. And I lose sleep about tom sounds, you know, like it's just, I think that sort of thing doesn't usually happen. And because the three of us run a studio, we're all producers, we all write pop songs all day, we all make all sorts of different stuff, R&B, hip hop, whatever. I think that comes across because we've got so used to the idea that you just serve the song that we don't care about whether my guitar part's louder or something, you know. And a lot of bands, it takes them a long time to get to that point. You normally get that with bands that they've had like a 30-year career, and they understand that it doesn't matter. Ego is not a thing anymore. And I think being involved in production in a big way really helps get to that mindset a bit sooner than some bands would.
So now that we know how you got to the sound, how did you get to the vocals? Because I thought your vocals were absolutely outstanding on the record. Really impressive. the same approach you took with the guitars and the overall sound in terms of serving the song, I felt you took exactly the same approach vocally. Depending on what the mood of the song was, what the lyrics were, what you felt the song was calling for, that's exactly with the delivery you went. And then even within the song, you would slightly change it depending on which part of the song you were working with. How did you think about the vocals even going into the record before you start recording?
We always have a joke that we're a 5-piece band because we have 3 instruments and 2 voices. And whatever you do in a band, if you're not instrumental, the vocal is the central thing in a song. Like, whether you like it or not, even the most diehard like guitarist is probably listening to the vocal. It's a big important thing. So it's not my job, it's all of our job to make sure that the melodies are fantastic, and the 2 guys like really work with me. I'd come up with like an idea and it would get pulled and changed and chopped in the same way that the guitar riffs would or the bass parts would. So it's really a collaborative effort in terms of writing the parts themselves. And our whole thing for this whole record was literally a bunch of evenings. Once a week, we'd get together and we'd do something, and we'd write a demo. I think, for example, Winter Keeps Us Warm was 6 hours from the very beginning to the very end of writing and completing the demo for that song, which had all the lyrics and everything. It was like such a nice, easy, organic process, because anytime anybody had an idea, everybody was on the table to say, that's great, lose that, that's not needed, that's really cool, oh, I love this, do this again. And it just snowballed into a really cool thing. So I think part of that is just knowing each other really well and being really trusting of each other and having that kind of mindset where that works. In terms of delivering the vocals, I'm probably going to piss you off because I only re-recorded 3. The rest are all the demo vocals.
Really?
Yeah.
Man, I thought, honestly, after listening to the album, I thought, oh man, this guy must have spent like a month in the studio going, like almost recording like a line by line, because it felt so perfect. Like perfect tone, perfect delivery, perfect emotion.
It's annoyingly, so I feel the same way, like that's my normal process. But because it was so organic, the writing of this album, and basically we made every single song on the album complete as a demo, and then we re-recorded the drums, and then we re-recorded the bass, and we re-recorded the guitars. And obviously you're going to end up with cool little things that stay, like a cool little guitar part or whatever that stays. I just assumed I was going to re-record every vocal. I came in and I did, which song were we working on? I think it was Singularity, it was the first one I did. And Billy was like, this is fine, but it's not as cool as the demo. The verses on the demo are better. And I was like, obviously you're wrong. You're talking shit. And then I listened and I was like, you know what? Because it was in the moment and we wrote the lyric and then ran in. We were drinking beers in the control room going, oh, that would be cool. Ran into the booth, put a couple of lines down, ran back again. And it was just fun. I was having fun. And that comes across. I re-recorded like the chorus line of that song, for example, and I re-recorded all of Winter Keeps Us Warm because that was written so quickly. I did a better job, and I re-recorded Dust. That's a really challenging melodic part, and I wanted to do that again, and it came out and it was better. But the whole time, the guys were like, "If you want to try again, go for it." But I think this is cool. Like, just run with it. And I wouldn't have done that if it was me on my own. I would have spent months, like you say, tweaking every bit and probably made it shit. Because I probably would have gone through and really made it like sterile. But the way it is on the record is just a true representation of how excited I was when we wrote the part. So
yeah, see, for me, the way you're describing is almost like you recorded as like a jam session. And the way it came across on the record, it doesn't have that feel. So to me, it's really interesting that it sounds like one thing, but it was recorded in a completely different setting. It's so interesting how you have A and it sounds like B. You know what I mean? Like the two just don't seem to go together.
That's true.
That's just interesting.
It is interesting. I mean, we were surprised as well, and actually, Billy was really annoyed because. he put like 5 days of his life into those master drum tracks, and they are significantly they outshine everything he's ever done before. It's fantastic. He killed himself. We killed him doing it. And he was the one saying, you nailed this. You don't need to do this again. I was like, shut up. But what's interesting, I suppose our bar for where a demo should be is probably quite high. It's not like, let's all get to, we didn't write this album in the room together jamming. We wrote it in pieces. So Singularity was written where Billy had a drum exercise. It was like ba da 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 da. It had that rhythm to it. So I just took that and translated to a guitar and wrote the riff to that. But we did that together. He wasn't playing drums; he was tapping his knees, you know. And then I programmed drums for that, and we'd be in the room. Right, let's record like the riff, guitar. Let's put bass. Let's put drums. Program drums and make it sound cool. Then we'll move on to the next section of the song. So it was like a computer game. You're like completing the level and moving on to the next one. The big boss at the end. But so I guess our process, even though that's quite unusual for us, it's not the way we normally did it. That just felt so fun and organic that it probably feels more natural than if it had just been us jamming. Because the whole of our first two records was a lot of jamming, basically. So yeah, we're as surprised as anybody that it actually worked. But I guess that's kind of the beauty of it. We didn't plan that. It's just the way it happened that way, you know? And it was fun.
Yeah, it becomes a cool record and a cool story to tell. That's for sure.
Right? Yeah, it's always going to be fun. But it was definitely the most satisfying writing process we've ever been through.
I know the question that I'm going to ask you is a difficult one because I feel it's a difficult one to answer, not to ask, but to answer. Do you have a favorite track on this album? Because I'm sure you're going to say that all of them are your favorites because it's like picking your favorite child. But is there one that kind of stands out?
Motorcade. That's my favorite. And not because I don't know if it's like the best song, and I'm sure people will relate to it differently, but for me, it's, I just love the journey of the song. So I really like the rhythm. In Motorcade, there's another one that was written, I guess drums were probably the first thing for the verse. It goes ba 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 ba, right? That's the rhythm. And that's like kick drum and bass. And watching those guys do that and it working is like crazy satisfying. And then I also got a little bit kind of Maynard and wrote a rhythm for the lyric, which is it's in iambic pentameter, like the Shakespearean thing where it's 10 syllables. Mm-hmm. So it's 10 syllables across this crazy thing. And I just, in a geeky way, I find that so satisfying. And I have my voice is going through like a bass distortion pedal, and it sounds really weird and crazy, and it's just super fun. But then to break from there into the big like chorus of it, I really love that. And then it goes down into one of the most mellow parts of the record, with the like side sticks on the tom rims and stuff, which sounds so cool. And then the riff back into sharpen your knives. The big riff there is like my favorite moment. I think my favorite dynamic moment on the album. So I don't know.
It's funny you say that because that's also one of my favorite songs on the record. So we're on the same page.
I love that song. I also really like Dust because it's such a techie riff and it just kicks so much ass at the beginning and it's really cool. But then I'm basically a pop melody writer. That's what I do all day, and that's what I do for our band as well. But I kind of feel like a lot of bands I love, that's basically what it is. If you re-recorded Nirvana and you put it as a pop song, it would work. Mm-hmm. The melodies are pop melodies. It's just that they're done with an edge and with a heaviness that it kind of works. I think I'm always a sucker. I can't remember lyrics, but I can remember melodies all day long. It's just really sticks with me. So I feel like the melodic aspects for me are probably some of the most exciting parts.
Last question for you. If you had to describe this record to somebody who hasn't heard the record yet, what word or what couple of words would you use to describe this album?
What did I call it in an interview the other day? I think I said melodic tech riff box. I don't even know what that really means. But it's like, you need to sum up the fact that it is technical, it is complex, it is crazy, and it is progressive. But at the end of the day, you can sing every word and it makes sense. You can sing the melodies and it makes sense. And you're never left. Our big crucial rule is you can write in any time signature you want, but you don't want to be left nodding up. So like nod down. But you know, sometimes you're listening to a song and you get lost in the middle of a nod. You don't want that.
I know exactly what you're talking
never
about.
It
Happened to me yesterday, actually. I know exactly what you're talking about. I was listening to something and I was doing this, and then when I came back up, it stayed up.
Yeah, and it feels so jarring, and you're like, huh? But like, the best weird time signature stuff is like the Mission Impossible theme. No one knows that's in fives. It just makes sense. It just makes sense. Or like Money by Pink Floyd. That's not in 4/4, but no one knows that. No one thinks about it because it's so natural. So we're always trying to make, like, natural selection. The verse is in, I think, 13/8, but everyone's just listening to it. They don't care about time signatures. We just did that because it felt cool to like shorten a bar. But I think that's the rule. Be as complicated as you like, but don't nod up.
Be complicated as you like, but still make it sound like it's very simple.
And sound like it's natural.
Natural, organic, yeah.
Yeah, and that if you can get that to work, that's what's exciting to us. And we've already got like maybe 10 riffs for the 4th album, so we'll see where that goes.
Ooh, you guys, well, I mean, there's a lot of time now with no shows, no touring.
That's the problem,
you might as well stay busy and do something, you know what I mean? So if that means working for a new record, so be it. That means there's a new album coming a lot sooner than otherwise would be expected.
Yeah, let's hope so. Although I suspect that 2021 is going to be a big year for touring. So
yeah, but the problem, let's see, the downside with that is that everybody's going to want to hit the road, and then there's going to be like an overflow of bands touring and not enough venues for everybody. And you know, it's going to be an interesting year for music, in my opinion, because even a lot of bands push their records to late into 2020, early 2021. So I feel like perhaps now is actually a good time to release an album because people are home, people get a chance to listen to it. And then maybe if you want to release an EP down the road, like before you, like, let's say you have a tour mid 2021, release like 2 or 3 new songs just so you have some new fresh material. But I think it's going to be perhaps a year that's going to be saturated with too much music as well.
Yeah, and I think it's kind of working in our favor at the moment that people are at home and listening to records, and it's been a really good reception. We've noticed that a lot of people are listening to it more than once, so they have the whole album and then they start again and listen to it. And I think that's a really, really interesting thing, because a lot of the time people are, maybe they're on the way to work, they have like 40 minutes, right? They're going to listen to the record and that's it. You wouldn't be in your car and go, I'm just going to put it on again. But at home, you're just in your house, you think, you know what, I want to hear that at the beginning, you know? And or maybe it's just because it has such a cool intro, and that intro is, the voiceover is done by Billy, just so you know. So maybe that's what's putting people in. Like the sound of his, they sound like the sound of his voice.
Hey, whatever you guys did it right, because like I said, I discovered you guys through this record, and the moment I played it, I was like, okay, I'm gonna have to listen to the whole album and do a review. And from the numbers that are out there, I'm not alone. So I'm not like the only guy who feels that way about the album. So it shows you that whatever it is that you guys put together, it's definitely maybe not the right formula, because I hate using that expression, because I want music to be organic and to feel the moment. But you guys definitely captured this moment with this record, and congratulations for that.
Thank you very much. That's kind of how we feel about it as well. Sometimes you just stumble on a thing that works. It's a formula or something you know is going to happen in advance. So, I mean, maybe they have a formula in the pop world, but I don't know it. So,
yeah, like exactly.
I think it's usually just happy circumstance and mostly hard work. That's when things usually connect.
Yeah, without some hard work and talent, you're really not going to go far. You need those 2 things in your back pocket, and I think you guys have both for sure. And this album shows, like I told you, I really felt like when you listen to it, you can feel the work that went into every single song, all the little details, all the levels that the tracks have, all the texture that the songs have. It's just not something that you do, you know, in your basement when you have nothing better to do with your time, you know. I think it starts, but
I think the main thing is, you wouldn't do that just because somebody asked you to. you would do it because you were addicted to it and you had to do it. And nobody who's in a band that isn't fully committed would ever go to the amount of ridiculous, stupid lengths that we have done. And nobody would do it if they were like on their 6th album with a label and it was like an obligation, they had to do that album. It never happened. So I think we just feel really lucky that we've got an opportunity to be supported by great guys and have the room to create the thing we wanted to create and just do whatever we wanted to do with it. And this is what we wanted to do with it.
And it shows. Well, Paul, thank you very much for your time, man. I really appreciate you taking the time today to chat with me about the record. For those watching that haven't had a chance to pick up yet, go pick it up. Black Orchid Empire Semaphore is out right now. Longbretch Records, great guys, great label. I love those guys there. Really good friends and always putting out great bands. And you guys are just the latest that these guys have shared with the world. So once again, thank you very much for your time. And hopefully I'll see you on the road in 2021 when this whole COVID thing is over.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me, man.
No problem. Take care.
Cheers.